Reimagining Success, episode 192. You're listening to Reimagining Success, the podcast where we help you reimagine your future, designing a life and career beyond the 9 to 5 that allows you the freedom, flexibility and fulfillment that you've been dreaming of. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg. Now, let's get started on those dreams. So a brief intro to the intro here today. I know it's pretty exciting. I am doing my next Escaping the 9 to 5 interview today for you. This one is with a mentor of mine, someone I've been following for some time, and he's bringing huge amounts of value today. Partly for that reason, and partly because I've been running these interviews now for many, many years. My business has evolved. The businesses of the kind of people I'm working with have evolved as well. And of course, my thinking has evolved. I decided to try a different interview approach this time. So if you've been listening before, if you've read my book, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, if you've been listening to the Escaping the 9 to 5 interviews, they're pretty organic, but I tend to ask the same kinds of questions in terms of what led you to quit your job to start your business? What were the obstacles? Where did you get support? What's the best part of your lifestyle now? And what advice would you give? Now, for today and ongoing, I believe, because it worked really, really well today, I have decided to instead approach the interview with, of course, the introduction of what were you doing before, what are you doing now, and delving into those career and business choices, but then getting specifically into my 5 pillars. So if you're new to my community, you can go ahead and go to onestepoutside.com/scorecard, onestepoutside.com/scorecard to find a free PDF that walks you through those 5 pillars and asks you a set of 10 questions for each one. But these are, number 1, your personal definition of success. Number 2, cultivating confidence and resilience. Number 3, choosing the right business model. Number 4, building an effective personal brand. And number 5, designing flexible work-life integration. These are the 5 pillars that I believe are crucial for designing and building a life and business outside the 9 to 5. They provide now the structure for my content, for my paid programs. My new Business Academy course walks you through those 5 pillars. So in fact, check that out as well. onestepoutside.com/course. And so this is the approach I've chosen for today's interview. I'm following through those 5 pillars, asking my interview candidate, my guest today, what his perspective is on those 5 pillars. I got some real gems out of this. So again, I hope you enjoy. Have a listen. Let me know what you think. Without further ado, here is today's Escaping the 9 to 5 interview. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to this month's Escaping the 9 to 5 interview. And I'm here with someone who's not only an entrepreneur, but a serial entrepreneur, known for his love of Bruce Lee, bonsai and whiskey, but most importantly, or perhaps less importantly, I don't know, let's see. He's also the founder of virtualstarfounder.com and Youpreneur.com. So a massive welcome to Chris Ducker.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. Now, I know you, and most people do know you from your personal brand empire, which is your Youpreneur business. And yet I know you've had a few twists and turns along the way. So would you mind going back to the beginning, I guess, of your career to give us a little insight into what the pre-Youpreneur, pre-staff finder career looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, depends on how far you want to go back. But basically, we're looking at the publishing world. That's where I kind of started from a full-time sort of type of, job environment at the age of about 17 or so. I didn't go to university, much to my father's dismay at the time, and went straight into working in the publishing game in the classified sales section of the industry, and kind of sat there for about 2 or 3 years, actually, just learning the craft of sales, really, which, back in those days was really the telephone and face-to-face. And so that was kind of, should we say, the foundation of the career. And then going into my 20s, I was lucky enough to get promoted a few times. And by the time I was 25, I was managing guys, twice my age in a small sales team, and kind of went from there. And then eventually ended up I was headhunted by a recruiting firm for one of the big financial banks in the Philippines in the late 90s. Went over there in 2000 and was there working within that industry for 3-4 years before I set up my own company, and in 2004, and been an entrepreneur ever since.
Amazing. And did you always have those entrepreneurial inklings? Were you the Richard Branson who was sort of hustling away along the side from the beginning, or was it quite a spontaneous decision at the time? What led you to make that decision to take the leap?
I think, I'd already been kind of side hustling for at least 5 or 6 years. We had a small publishing business on the side, myself and a partner at the time. And that kind of like spiraled quite quickly, actually. In the kind of mid to late 90s in the UK, the Hong Kong film industry was very, 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 very popular. And I'm showing my age by talking about the mid-90s. I know that. But it was very, very popular. And, you had guys like, Bruce, everybody knew Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, but there was a host of other actors over in Hong Kong specifically, as well as the outer reaches of Asia, that were becoming more and more popular here in the UK with a niche community. And so we set up a small publishing company. We published a magazine called Hong Kong Superstars. That was a quarterly magazine. It was a full-blown, full-color thing. That kind of spiraled on to doing work with the BBC as a consultant for that niche, that genre. And then going ahead and actually going to Hong Kong on several different trips and shooting footage for a documentary that we kind of self-created and produced and sold on VHS. Yes, I'm really dating myself now. And it was a great time because everybody was so accessible over there. It was pre-social media. So we would send, sort of faxes to all of these actors and the producers and directors and whatnot, and wait to hear your fax machine connecting in the middle of the night because of the time differences, and it was great. And that kind of really spurred me on from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like the organization of bringing people like Jackie Chan and Jet Li and these other big, who are now very big international stars, who at the time were just really starting their careers off, at least internationally anyway, and bringing those guys to the UK and doing, midnight screenings in London's Chinatown and all that kind of stuff. It was good fun, but it really taught me about organization of, international business, working with time zones, international dialing codes, putting deals together with cinemas and distribution and all that kind of stuff. So 5, 6, 7 years of like a bit of a boot camp for entrepreneurship, while at the same time working a 9-to-5 job in sales.
Yeah, and on the basis of sales, which is such a great foundation as well, obviously, for working for yourself. And I love the heritage business there in terms of VHS and fax. It's not quite the tools we have at our disposal these days, but clearly you learned the foundation.
The system, or the strategy rather, behind using that form of communication compared to the form of communication that we use today is identical. And that hasn't changed in terms of the strategy. It's outreach, it's qualification, it's all that sort of stuff. So nothing's really changed, but everything has changed. You know what I mean?
I love that, because even in the few years that I've been in business, it's gone from a very different world where there weren't that many podcasts, and we obviously didn't have TikTok and so on. I mean, Facebook was pretty new in my final years of corporate and so on. So it's great to hear that applies even to, I was going to say, prehistoric times of VHS cassettes and so on, that, as you say, the strategies, the big picture frameworks, the principles are still the same. So we don't have to get too stressed about whether it's TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever. It's much more the bigger picture, the strategies, the frameworks and so on. So, And so 2004, did you say you started the business? So what was it that triggered that, and how did you come up with your idea? What was the moment there for you?
I initially had a 2-year contract over there. Like I said, we were one of the international banks, and then they extended that for another 2 years. But about halfway through that second contract, I had started to feel itchy. The feet were getting itchy, and I was setting up, relatively large subsidiaries for different agencies that were affiliated with the bank, and kind of really getting to the grips of everything from, budgeting to costs to expenditure to negotiating leases on office premises and hiring hundreds of people, all these things that, every business owner, particularly small business owner, right out of the gate really needs to have. Many, or rather only very few, have all of that experience under their belt when they get going. And I was very blessed to be in a position where I picked up all that experience based off of the foundations of sales and marketing, which, as we all know, is one of the most important parts of any business, no matter what industry you're in. And I felt quite blessed to be in that position. And then, I kind of was coming to the end of the contract and they wanted to renew again. And I was like, I don't want to work with you anymore. I want to work for myself. I'm making you all this money. I kind of want to make myself all this money. And so that's what I did, and went out and set up my own sales and marketing consulting company where we were training very, very large businesses. San Miguel Beer Corporation, probably one of the biggest companies in the Philippines, floats on the stock exchange over there, right the way down to, the mom and pop beach resort who wanted to, have a high occupancy rate over the summer months, that kind of stuff. And we taught them how to sell and we taught them how to market themselves. And again, we're talking 2005, 2006 here. The internet was around, but not really for much more than, YouTube and email kind of thing, right? And so, there was a lot going on, and we were very lucky to be, I think, in quite a unique situation at a very unique time where the technology was really starting to pick up and move quicker. And by 2008, so we're talking about four years or so in, turning into 2008, we decided that we were going to grow the business. We were going to go all in on the outsourcing sector. Being in the Philippines, that was a string to the bow, so to speak. And we opened the door with, I think, 15 employees, went up to about 35, then almost went bankrupt, survived. And by the end of the first year, we had 85 staff. That was like 12 months of just like, oh, wow. Oh my God, what are we doing kind of thing. And the rest is history. We're a multi-7-figure annual business now, and 3 different companies within the group, and employing almost 400 people. So yeah, the boy did good, as my dad would say.
Oh, definitely. So with that in mind, I guess this podcast is called Reimagining Success. And I wonder, how would you define success today? And how has that definition evolved over these different periods of your life?
I think my definition of success has changed quite a bit over the course of the last 15, 16 years or so. At first I was very money hungry, very money led. It was all about the money at the end of the day. And it wasn't necessarily about getting to $1 million, that 7-figure thing that everyone goes on about. It wasn't about that. I knew that would happen just as a natural conclusion of hard work in the industry that we were in, because it was a big industry. It was booming. It was growing very quickly. Going into the outsourcing world after being steeped very richly in sales and marketing consulting, I knew we would do well if we could just keep our costs down and land a couple of decent sized clients. And we did that. And then going into 2010, we opened the doors to Virtual Staff Finder, which was our second business in the group. And that just went gangbusters. Like, the 4-hour work week had just come out, and everyone was talking about lifestyle design and outsourcing and all these kind of things. So
good timing.
Yeah, really good timing. Some people might say lucky. Nope, it was just good timing, plain and simple. I think you make your own luck. I truly believe that to a certain extent anyway. And I think that, up to probably 2013, 2014, I was just all about the money. And to be frank, by that point, we were already doing multi-7 figures on an annual basis. With at least, 2014, we would have been at 250 staff or so. And you don't really realize, actually, this is where it started to change for me. It was Christmas 2014. That year, my first book, Virtual Freedom, had come out earlier in the year. And we have this huge company party every Christmas. And Christmas in the Philippines is a really, really big thing, really big. And so we had this massive party, and there was 250 people in front of me, and I was on stage giving out various staff awards. And then it hit me. This is success. It's not necessarily the money. The money's good, but knowing that 250 families plus are being fed because of something that I created, albeit a few years back, I've grown it. This is success. But then as things changed, you become maybe a little bit more self-conscious, a little bit selfish to a certain degree, which is fine. And I think because I'm at the point where I'm only a year and a bit or so away from being 50 years old. So now the focus of my own personal success comes into play. It's not legacy or anything like that, but it comes down to like, how do I want to live myself? And definition of success for me now is actually being able to do what the heck I want whenever I want to do it. It's really that simple. And so I've pulled back on a lot of commitments. I say no now 9 times out of 10 to doing anything, quite frankly. And I've got to the point where, I'm really only working 3 days a week at this point, pretty much. And that will probably drop down to 2 going into next year. So that for me now is what success looks like. But it hasn't always been like that. Sometimes I often say that, hustle is a season. It's not a lifestyle. So sometimes you've got to put your foot down on the gas and really hustle hard, whether it be for 12 months, 18 months, 5 years, whatever. It's different for everyone. But it's not a lifestyle. It's not sustainable to hustle all the time. But you can go through hustle seasons. And we still, as a group of companies to this day, we still go through hustle seasons. Usually for us, it's the last quarter of the year and the second quarter of the year. It just happens to be like that for us, but it might be different for other folks. But generally, that's the way I look at it now.
I love that. The seasons is a great way of putting it. I always think there's a rhythm. You kind of push, but you can't maintain that pace all the time. So then you have to pull back. Would you say, just a question that comes to mind, that you need to have that hustle, that you had to have the single-minded focus on the money first, and that has then allowed you to now be a bit more sort of lifestyle designy and go 3 days, 2 days and so on? Or do you think that we can from the beginning design a business that, we love from the very beginning? Do we have to have that hustle season first up, would you say?
Well, bear in mind, like, I've always loved my businesses. Like I've never fallen out of love with my business. Sure, there's been some tough times. Sure, it's drove me nuts from time to time. I burnt out before, all those things. But like, I always loved doing what I do for a quote unquote living, right? I think, however, that in order to be exactly where I am right now, at my time of life, my age, and the era that I'm in currently for myself and my family, we have zero debt, we have zero mortgage, we have multiple properties, we're very comfortable financially, et cetera, et cetera. For me to be in that position now and have that runway for this part of my life, yes, absolutely. I needed to focus on the money earlier on. I needed a hustle earlier on. But again, it's not sustainable. Now, that doesn't mean, though, and I want to caveat that doesn't mean that you can't go into a new business with a lifestyle or, a work-life balance focus. It doesn't mean you can't do that. You absolutely can, because it's your business, and your definition of success from a monetary perspective is completely different to mine or anybody else's. Like, there might be some people that say, I have to make $500,000 a year, for example. But then you could have somebody else who's in an identical position with the exact amount of experience, serving the absolute exact same niche or industry. And they, their definition of success is 100K a year, and they're happy with that. So it's very subjective. Money and numbers in general are just very subjective. But for me personally, I felt like I needed to put that hustle in order to create the lifestyle that we've got now.
And that's so important. As you say, people have this sort of 6-figure, 7-figure, just a random number they've plucked out of the air. And actually, sometimes there's a ceiling, there's sort of a maximum of what you want to earn to have that lifestyle that you want. And you mentioned there that really difficult year, and you mentioned briefly your burnout. What do you think has helped you both develop that self-belief that, I know this is going to be successful and I know I can make it, and also the resilience, I guess, to bounce back from those setbacks? Confidence. Like, I'm a confident guy. I've never not lacked confidence in everything that I've done. So I've never started any business ever that I didn't think was going to be a success. I've only had one flop as a business owner, and that was killed after 6 months and 50 grand in the hole.
I was just like, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not going to work. So we just closed the doors on it. And my personal kind of focal point has always been to just show up really transparently. Like there's no smoke or mirrors around me. What you see is what you get. And I've mentored and coached you as well as tons of other people out there over the years. And those who appreciate where I come from and my style of delivery and coaching and the expertise that I've built up over the years will stay with me, and they'll do great things as a result. Those who aren't in that camp and maybe, try us out a little bit and for whatever reason don't gel, they'll pop on, and that will be absolutely fun. I wish them all the best, because you can't please everybody all the time. You know what I mean? So I think I've always gone into every business I've started thinking it's going to be a raving success. But in terms of coming back from burnout, that was just a matter of, it was 2010. We had just hit our first 7-figure year. We were at about 150 employees, and I burnt out. I mean, we're talking like hospital time, antidepressants, IVs, the whole kit and caboodle. And you look at that, and you look at a situation like that, and you've got two options. You can either kind of just succumb to it and say, well, it's over, I can't be bothered, I don't want to do it anymore. Or you fight back to health and wellness, and you continue to show up and serve. And that's what we did. That's what we did. I remember my wife, who you has obviously got to know a little bit over the last couple of years. She was making green smoothies for me like 3 times a day, trying to get all these vitamins and minerals back into my system after burning out and losing a ton of weight. And it was shocking stuff. Acute exhaustion, acute dehydration, antidepressants. Like I said, it was a tough moment, but it wasn't gonna last forever. And I knew, I needed to come out of it.
And I guess in terms of the business model, did you shift that then in response to that? How have you set up your business now to make sure that doesn't happen again?
It really, yeah. I mean, I just started delegating. Prior to that, I wanted to be all the things to all the departments. I would, one minute I'd be, doing interviews and hiring people. Next minute I'd be selling. Minute after that I'd be training. Then I'd be, walking around our server room, looking at cables, having no idea what the bloody hell they, flashing lights and everything, thinking to myself, yeah, that all looks okay, knowing absolutely nothing about it. Just your typical micromanaging nightmare type A entrepreneur personality. The burnout comes around. We're like, for this to carry on, you can't carry on doing what you're doing at the level that you're doing it at. We need to hire people. We actually hired 8 people in 2010 to replace me. 8 different people. And since then, it's really just, going into like 2013, 2014, 2015, less and less time in the office, more and more focused on quality rather than quantity. That's been a big thing. And 2015, I think I started No Work Friday. Haven't worked a Friday since, except for, speaking gigs, traveling, that kind of type of thing. And that's pretty much been the way I've kept it at bay. And also like just being really, really in tune with my strengths. You get some people that say, oh, I'm going to work on my weaknesses. I need to work on my weaknesses. Don't work on your weaknesses. Delegate the things that you're good at. Yeah. And then work on your strengths. It'll help you make a lot more money. That's for sure.
Good advice there. And I guess it's almost impossible to answer, but do you think you could have avoided that burnout? I mean, what did you have to go through that in order to learn those lessons, do you think? Or could you have anticipated it?
You always hear about people saying, oh, you're not going to be able to do it on your own. You've got to build a team. But like, I know so many entrepreneurs that have burnt out for the exact same reason. And I think also, particularly those entrepreneurs that bootstrap, like from the very, very bottom, and build their business up because they learned how to do everything themselves. It became second nature to close a deal, do whatever they needed to do to deliver on that deal and invoice at the same time. It was, design a logo. Yeah, I can do that. All these things that you just do it because you've got to save money and you've got to focus on keeping costs down. And so you just carry on doing all this stuff. And then it becomes really, really hard to start delegating things and handing things off. And I think, it's also a fear of losing control for a lot of people too. I knew that was the case for me initially. Now I can't wait to delegate. And something lands in my inbox or on my desk, I'm like, who can do this? Because I don't want to. Yeah. And so now all I do is I spend time in my zone of genius. And that means creating content to help market and grow my businesses and serving my clients across the 3 different businesses, right? So one day that might look like, having a 1 hour long teleconference call with clients in New York who have got 200 employees with me. The next day, it could be working with my virtual staff finder team to onboard, 15 new VAs for a huge internet marketing firm. And then the day after that, it could potentially be working with folks like you and helping them learn how to build and market their businesses, right? So it doesn't matter what hat I'm using now or what hat I'm wearing now, only I can do those things. And so everybody else around me can do all the other stuff.
That's a great position to be in. I feel like we can go 2 ways, especially come from the corporate background. We either, as you say, bootstrap and do everything ourselves, and then we get into this habit. It's really hard then to let go of things. Or I've seen clients and colleagues do the opposite. We're used to the big corporate budget and so on, and we get like a fancy PR agency and a custom design website, and suddenly nobody wants my thing, and I've just spent thousands of pounds on it. So there's unfortunately the 2 scenarios, I guess, and that's probably something we learn to navigate with the experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the stuff that, I always say that, that's you earning your stripes.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. That
can't be bought. You need to go through some crap in order to come out, better at the other end. I don't think it's possible to build a business from day one all the way up to, wherever that big rainbow is for you, and not learn some very costly lessons along the way, or develop a few issues along the way, either individually or as a business, for you to be able to fix. I think that's just it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to avoid it. It's inevitable.
And of course, I know you, and I think most people would know you from the latest edition, I guess, of what you're doing, the Youpreneur community. Building a personal brand, you say it's the last pivot we ever need to make in the business. What have been the most effective ways in which you found that you've been able to build your, what is a very now impressive personal brand platform? What have been the best ways in which you've done that?
I think, there's probably been 3 or 4 things that have worked pretty much consistently since I started focusing on it. Which was probably around really focusing in on it as a genuine business model, was probably around 2012. So about 10 years ago. Prior to that, you start your companies, you build your website, you pay your AdSense accounts, you do all the things to be able to get clients in and whatnot. Virtual Staff Finder came about in 2010 through a blog comment on my personal blog. Wow. In early 2010. And I've been blogging for about 6 months or so. I didn't really think anybody was really reading or anything, but you get a few comments, you reply to them here and there. But we had a comment that come through that said something to the effect of, if there was a company that I knew and I could trust in order to do the recruiting for me, to find a VA, I'd pay for that as a service so that I didn't have to waste the time going through online jobs or Odesk or Elance at the time, that sort of type of thing. And so 2 weeks later, we opened the doors to Virtual Staff Finder, and it was a 1-page website for 3 years.
Wow.
I kid you not. All it was a landing page for 3 years. And the reason why that worked so well is because we built it off the back of my personal brand. Already been in the outsourcing industry for, 3-4 years at the time, had a good amount of international business contacts that could spread the word for me, already been blogging and podcasting for a couple of years, and really had the ability to lean into my personal brand, although I didn't really call it that at the time. And then, once I kind of plugged into it, 2012, 2013, you start really focusing on the stuff that you're putting out. So the content you create becomes a little bit more important to you. It's not just about, oh, it's Wednesday, I need to write a blog post.
Yeah.
You genuinely start thinking about the content that you're creating because you know it's going to be seen, you know it's going to be shared and talked about, or at least you hope it will do anyway. And so, I think probably creating online content on a consistent basis, number one. And when I say consistent, I mean weekly, quite frankly, right? Not just once a month or something. And understanding that every single time you hit publish on something, whether it be a blog, podcast, or video, even a social media post that's got some real thought behind it, that's a business asset that you've just set forth into the world. And people will find it 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, right? So that's the first thing, number one. Number two, without a doubt, speaking has been astronomically important to the growth of my personal brand. I've been featured in Entrepreneur and Forbes and Success Magazine and all these other things. Almost all of those articles and those features have come off of meeting people after being on stage. After being on stage, not just going to a conference and meeting them at a mixer, but actually them seeing me on stage. Chris, love that message. Would love to do a feature for Success on you or for Forbes on you. So that's been a big one for sure. And then I would say probably my books have been incredibly important to me. I think when you put when you put your name on the front cover of a book, it creates a certain aura of expertise and leadership in your industry. And then, lastly, I would say just being a connector as well. I've been very, very fortunate to build an incredible network for myself, all of which are, I class pretty much all of the people I'm connected with as friends now. Some of those relationships are obviously a lot deeper and closer than others, but I've been very, very lucky to, be introduced to folks, to have dinner with people, to spend time with people in a personal setting, and all that kind of stuff. And these are relationships I truly treasure. I don't look at utilizing them for business gain. And I think that's been another really important part of things as well. And when somebody knows you're a connector and they think, oh, Chris might know somebody, that's huge, because now you're top of mind for a lot of things. Oh, Chris might know a video editor, or Chris might know a female speaker. Chris might know XYZ developer, right? So all these things, I think, come over a certain time. They're not done overnight either.
I really get that from you. Genuinely, when you introduce someone, it's always my buddy and my friend, and it's clear that you know each other. You're not just saying that. So it's not just, pulling someone's
stories,
name.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's real stories behind
the real relationship.
What's even better is when somebody comes along and they tell the story. I don't have to tell the story, but when they tell the story about something happened with Chris in XYZ restaurant or something, that just kind of solidifies that relationship even further. And I think, that's always, it's always nice to hear and see.
And I have to ask, Youpreneur, I think you coined it in one of those keynote speeches, right? Was it something that you brainstormed and just come to you as a flash of genius? I'm such a fan. I'm sure it's divisive and people love it or hate it, but I think it's so good. And we often aspire to these really catchy names. So what's the secret? How did you come up with it?
What happened was it was ad-libbed, not the word Youpreneur or the term Youpreneur, but I was in the middle of a keynote in Vegas, and there were two things I ad-libbed genuinely on that stage. The first one was P2P, people to people, and it just came to me. And we were talking about, different connections of B2B or B2C in the industry. And I kind of just turned around and said, what would be really cool? What would be really cool is if we adopted a P2P mindset or a P2P mindset. Hands up if you want real relationships, not just transactional relationships. And everyone was like, whoa, yeah, P2P, this is cool. So I kind of lent way into that. And then in the exact same talk, I talked about the business of you and how your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not at the conference and when you're not, at the coffee meeting or the dinner party or whatever. And that was I kind of took that. And on that same trip to the United States, I was hanging out with my buddy Pat Flynn at his house. We were staying there for about a week or so. And it was, I think it was Independence Day over there. We had a big barbecue and stuff, water fight. That was fun. Water balloons and all that sort of fun stuff. And afterwards we had made ourselves a cup of coffee. And the ladies and the kids were hanging out in the garden. We went into his home office, and that was where we actually muttered the word Youpreneur for the first time. And that kind of kicked off like a 12-month mission to buy Youpreneur.com from the guy who registered it at 10 years earlier, never did anything with it.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted like 20 grand for it. And I was like, dude, are you high right now? You've got like no assets, you've got no web traffic, no email list, So we ended up getting it for $5,000, which I was quite happy about, my negotiation skills on that. That's how it was born. That's how it came about.
Love that. Very organic. And again, the connecting piece, as you said, with Pat there as well. And the rest is history with the book, with the whole community now. So you mentioned also briefly your No Work Fridays, and we talked about delegating and so on. Just the final piece for me is that what I call work-life integration, if you want to call it life-work integration or harmony or work-life balance. What have been, I was going to say the secrets, it's not really secrets, but what have been your strategies to make that work for you? What does that look like for you to design the business around your life now?
Yeah, well, that's the tip. You just said the exact perfect words right there. Design the business around your life. So the big success here, or the big strategy, is that you put your own life first before anything else, right? So we do about 3 big holidays as a family every year. And then we do 3 or 4 little mini reset retreats of 3-4 nights or so as well. And pretty much all of them are planned like a year in advance. Or we at least map out the dates on the calendar. And we usually start doing that around sort of September, October, when we've got all the school dates, the terms and everything for the following year. Yeah. And so we've actually got a holiday booked for 2023 already, and we booked it like at the end of 2021. Nice. So I think it comes down to priorities at the end of the day. Like, so the priorities are, number one, me. Like, I'm the first priority, because if I'm not eating well, if I'm not being conscious of moving my body and exercising, if I'm not spending time to upgrade myself, if I'm not, spending time doing what I need to do every day, then I become stressed and everything else kind of crumbles, right? So first and foremost, is Chris a priority? Yes, he is. Yeah. He's priority number one. Number 2 then is my family, right? Number 3, kind of associated with number 2, is our calendar. Like, I want to create memories for my kids, like we're building a Wendy house on our property here right now. And my daughter's going out. We've got our handyman, Tommy, coming every morning. When we say I'm not doing the actual building. Like, I bought all the
outsourcing.
Stuff. Yes, I'm delegating is what I'm doing. Right? But every day, Cassandra goes out and she has a photo with Tommy and me to show the progression of now we're doing the base. Now the first wall's going up and all this sort of types of things. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. Like, it's creating those kind of memories, right? And that's what we do. We just focus on that side of things. And so, like you said, design the business based around your lifestyle, right? So what kind of life do you want to have? That's your priority. You got to figure that out. And it doesn't happen overnight. It might take several years to figure that out. But whatever that is, like, here's one thing that I know to be true, 100%. This ain't a rehearsal. What we're doing right now, our lives, this is it. This is the show. We don't get a do-over, right? So whatever it is that you are doing day to day, from a lifestyle perspective, from a business perspective, from an impact perspective, you have to be quite intentional about the way that you do it. And I just put myself, my family, first and foremost, before everything and anything else. Everything else is a second, and it should be like that. But obviously, you've been doing it long enough. You've got systems in place, you've got processes in place, you've got a team in place to help you execute on that vision and those ideas. Everything becomes that much more easier. You know what I mean? But life is not an Instagram, profile. It's not a highlight. There are, peaks and troughs and you've got to just handle it as you go by. But if you understand what the big priority is, and that's you and family, then everything else is secondary in my mind.
That's some powerful stuff there. And I guess, if we could leave the listeners with one step that they can take, it's so easy to look at. And what you've just said, it sounds dreamy. Yes, I worked hard, but now I'm here. I'm going to go down to 2 days a week, and I'm a sought after speaker and all these things. If someone's looking from afar and thinking, wow, I'd love to be there, what one thing could you leave them with to help them on that journey? Knowing that, yes, it's going to take time, but what's one tip, one step?
No, totally. I would say to schedule everything. That's the big thing. There's a whole bunch of different exercises and whatnot I could give people, but I'd say start looking at your schedule as the commodity that it is, because it is. Your yeses are a commodity. So every single time you put something on your schedule, that's time taken away that you could be doing something else. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's acquired, it's purchased fundamentally. And so for us to buy more time, we need to start saying no more often, right? So what's important? Is it important to get your first digital course out into the world? Well, if it is, then the chances are 4 to 6 weeks or so. If you say no to every single other request on that schedule, on that time of yours, the chances are you'll do it in 6 weeks. That's all it takes, really. Yeah. But if you've got lots of other things popping up all the time, it might take 6, 12, 18 weeks, right? So I think it just schedule everything. I always say if it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't get done. And so everything on my day is scheduled. My workouts are scheduled. Time, believe it or not, watering bonsai is on my calendar.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 15 minutes. I've got a lot of trees. 15 minutes to watering the trees. It goes on the schedule. Social media time on the schedule. Meetings with the team on the schedule. White space. I get an hour of white space after lunch every day for me to just either catch up on work or sit and do nothing. Read a book, go for a walk, whatever it is. And that's every single day. And then, Zoom calls on the schedule, retreats on the schedule, holidays on the schedule. Everything goes on the schedule. If it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't get done.
Yeah. That's so good. It's not so sexy, is it? The routine, the systems, the calendar, and so on. But that's the answer. I think anchoring your vision in the day to day is the secret to having the very freedom that you want.
Yeah, we have to do the unsexy work in order for all the sexiness to come about.
There we go. I think we got our quote for Instagram there. So we have to do the unsexy work to get the sexiness done. Well, look, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really value your expertise. I definitely encourage you guys, of course, if you haven't already, check out Chris has his podcast, of course. He's got Youpreneur.com, which he bought for $5,000 back in the day. ChrisDucker.com, of course. And Chris, what's next for you? What's the new exciting thing that you're working on this year?
Actually, we're again doing the unsexy work. We are in the process of looking at hiring probably our first real high-end executive role, and kind of just cleaning up the business a little bit. I think like a lot of businesses over the last couple of years, we've had to pivot slightly. We've had to move slightly. We had our live event 3 years in a row in London, which we had to put to sleep because of everything that happened. And so we're going to spend the rest of 2022 serving our current coaching clients. And we're doing that through the Youpreneur Incubator, which is our program, which you're a member of, obviously. And actually we're closing, here's a scoop for you, Anna. We're closing the doors in 2 weeks to that. And we're going to be doubling down on the people that are already in it. I want as many people who are in that program already, who are 100% committed and focused to be at 6 figures, which is what the program promises, and beyond by the end of this year. That's our big focus. So we're going to be doing that. And we've just been cleaning up. Like I deleted 20,000 people off my email list at the end of last week. We got a new podcast in the planning stages. Third book is being shopped to publishers in the United States as we speak. So we'll see whether I get my second publishing deal in America. That'd be kind of cool. Other than that, going to be taking
not that
it
much
easy.
going on.
Yeah.
A bit of blank space on the calendar, I hope. I don't know where you make time for that, but
and I'm going to do that in 2 hours a week, Anna.
I was going to say, there's a book for you, the 2-hour work week for you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much. And that sounds amazing. It's so tempting again to just keep getting more and more people in and to get hungry and greedy. It's like, oh, we can have 1,000 people in the incubator. And the fact that you're closing the doors and focusing on serving them and really making sure people are getting the results you promise, I think that's just a sign of your integrity and what you do.
Totally. We will open it again, likely towards the end of this year at some point. But I just want to, for those who's like any other program on the planet, let's keep it real here, okay? And maybe this is the way to end, because I'm going to drop a value bomb from like a mile right now. Even if you successfully sell a load of your digital courses, a load of your coaching programs, a load of your experiences, et cetera, only about 60% of the people that purchase will genuinely take it seriously. And out of that 60% or so, about 50% of those will actually achieve what you have set out to help them achieve, because there are other forces that are out there that get involved. Life gets in the way, right? Parenthood, health, financial, you name it, right? And so understanding that sometimes you have to go one step backwards, which is what a lot of people might see us doing right now by closing the doors and not bringing any new clients in. But the whole point is to be able to go 2 or 3 steps forward with the people that are already in. And that for me is the focal point. I'm well aware of the fact when we announce this at the end of the month, that there'll be a whole bunch of people inside of the program currently as it is that are going to get really excited about this and they're going to double down on their efforts.
Absolutely.
But there's probably going to be a whole bunch of people saying, big deal, whatever. Those will be the people that won't hit their goals this year. I guarantee it. Those that double down and get excited will. And that's really what it comes down to.
That's it. I love it. Well, looking forward to that then.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be in the former group, of course. And
I should bloody well hope so. Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, Chris Ducker, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. And best of luck with the new phase of your business. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks, Anna.
As it turns out, deciding that you want to create a career and a life for yourself outside of the 9 to 5, deciding to quit your job and start a business is only the beginning. It's a massive step and requires a lot of courage and commitment, but it is just the very first step. Through the twists and turns of my own transition out of my corporate employment and into working for myself, and through supporting my clients and community over the past several years, I've identified 5 key areas that you need to focus on to make your business and your lifestyle viable for the long term. To find out more and to check to see where you are on each of these 5 pillars, grab the free scorecard at onestepoutside.com/scorecard. That's onestepoutside.com/scorecard.